March 2026. Somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean, the USS Gerald R. Ford, the largest, most expensive warship ever built, is on fire. Not a metaphorical fire, an actual fire, aboard a vessel carrying thousands of sailors, high-tech aircraft, and weapon systems that do not exist anywhere else on Earth. When that happens, you do not debate options. You go to the place you trust most. The ship returned once again to Souda Bay in Crete, not to Izmir. And here is why that single decision tells you more about the real power map of the Eastern Mediterranean than anything you will ever read in a State Department briefing. Because this was not even close to the first time. Over the last 5 years, the United States has sent the Eisenhower, the Truman, the Bush, and the Gerald R. Ford to Souda Bay. Different years, different missions, different commanders, and every single time, the answer was the same Greek harbor. At some point, a pattern stops being coincidence and becomes policy. This is the story of how that policy was made, why Greece became the most valuable piece of military real estate in the Eastern Mediterranean, and why Turkey, once the unquestioned anchor of American power in this region, became something far more complicated. Here is a fact most people never think about. An aircraft carrier is not just a ship. It is a floating city, roughly 100,000 tons of steel, fuel, aircraft, and personnel. It draws approximately 12 meters of water at its deepest point. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the newest class, needs even more than that, which creates a problem. The Mediterranean's port infrastructure was built for a different era, for trade ships, fishing fleets, and occasionally smaller naval vessels. Not for monsters like this. There are fewer than a dozen ports in the entire Mediterranean basin capable of receiving an aircraft carrier at full capacity, without emergency dredging, without special preparation, without a political complication before the ship clears the harbor entrance. Fewer than a dozen. In a sea bordered by 21 countries, Souda Bay is one of them. Now, look at where Crete sits on a map, not as a holiday destination, as a weapons platform. From Souda Bay, a carrier strike group can redirect east or south within hours, without leaving Allied airspace, without rooting through a political choke point, without asking permission from a country that might change its mind by morning. That is not geography. That is power. But here is what the maps never show you. Souda Bay is not just a deep harbor. It is a complete military ecosystem, and that distinction matters enormously. Deep water berthing, secure anchorage, refueling infrastructure, ammunition handling, maintenance capacity, supply chain logistics, all inside the same perimeter. When a carrier strike group operates from Souda, it does not just park. It sustains, it recovers, it absorbs damage, replenishes, and redeploys without stopping the operational clock. And Souda does not operate alone. It shares Crete with the Hellenic Air Force's 115th Combat Wing at the adjacent airfield. During recent escalations in Iran, Greece added air and maritime coverage across the island's eastern approaches. The Americans are not docking in an open port. They are operating inside a defended, multi-layered Allied perimeter. For U.S. military planners, the question is never simply, can the ship dock? The real question is this: can the entire strike group sustain its mission from here, under real pressure, without political interference, with local Allied forces capable of protecting the environment around it? Souda answers every part of that question. But knowing a port is exceptional does not explain why Washington keeps returning to it. For that, you need to look at the numbers. This is not analysis. What you are about to see is a record, compiled from U.S. Navy schedules, Department of Defense statements, and Port Authority logs. No commentary added, no data removed, just the numbers. Take your time with this. 4 of the most powerful warships in the world, a 5-year window, the same Greek harbor appearing in the record again and again. Every ship that entered Souda Bay came back. That is not a rooting coincidence. That is not proximity. Greece shares no land border with a U.S. adversary. It has no permanent U.S. carrier battle group assigned to it. What it has is trust. Now, look at this. One carrier, 1 year, 1 visit. That is the entire record. You do not need an analyst, a general, or a State Department briefing to understand what that gap means. The numbers make the argument themselves, and they make it better than words ever could. What makes this list genuinely extraordinary is not the volume of visits, but the type of visits themselves. Routine port calls, operational support stops, post-deployment maintenance visits, emergency returns during active regional escalation. These are not the same category of need. They represent completely different levels of operational pressure, and Souda Bay appears across every single one of them. A port that handles routine visits but fails under emergency pressure is a port you use occasionally. A port that appears during routine operations, active deployments, and genuine emergencies, that is a port you depend on structurally. Military planners have a specific term for this kind of relationship. They call it a trusted node, a fixed point in a military network that commanders return to almost instinctively, because every time they have relied on it before, it has worked. Trusted nodes do not appear on press releases. They appear in the quiet operational decisions made inside planning rooms at 3 in the morning when someone asks, "Where do we send the strike group?" And the same answer comes back without debate. Souda Bay is that answer for the Eastern Mediterranean right now. But here's the question nobody is asking loudly enough. Why Greece? Why now? And why not Turkey, the NATO partner with more military mass, more geography, and a relationship with Washington that goes back 70 years? The answer to that question is the most consequential story in this region. There is one thing aircraft carriers need more than fuel, more than munitions, more than a deep water harbor. They need certainty. Real operational certainty, the quiet assurance that a partner will be there tomorrow without a new negotiation, without a new precondition attached, is one of the rarest assets in military planning. It cannot be purchased in a procurement contract. It cannot be manufactured through a summit photo. It is built across years of consistent behavior, tested under pressure, and confirmed when the margin for error is smallest. Greece has been building it, deliberately, systematically, largely out of view. Under the expanded U.S.-Greece Mutual Defense Cooperation Agreement, Greece did something most NATO allies do not do. It opened base access without being asked, upgraded infrastructure ahead of schedule, accelerated joint military coordination without public bargaining, without last-minute demands, without requiring American diplomatic management before every operational step. No theater, no leverage, delivery. And the timing matters. When the regional pressure was highest, during the Gaza escalation, during the Red Sea disruption, during every moment the Eastern Mediterranean threatened to tip, Greece made Souda more available, not less. It reinforced Crete's defensive architecture at the exact moment the Pentagon needed options, not complications. That is a deliberate strategic choice, and it is rarer than it sounds. Here is what it looks like in practice. When something goes wrong, when a ship catches fire, when a crisis escalates faster than expected, when a commander needs to redirect 100,000 tons of steel in 48 hours. A reliable partner means the answer is the same as last time, without a phone call, without a negotiation, without a cost. In military planning, trust is not built through grand gestures. It is built through accumulation, the accumulation of moments where an ally could have created friction and chose not to, where an ally could have bargained and delivered instead, where an ally could have made noise and stayed silent. Greece now has that account, and it is full. Greece's rise in this story was built on consistency, predictability, and smart positioning over time. I try to follow the same logic with my money. That is why today's video is sponsored by Freedom 24. I use it because it keeps investing simple, clear fees, a clean interface, and support in various languages. But more importantly, it gives me access to global markets in a straightforward way. And in a world where inflation keeps eating away at idle cash, doing nothing with your money is still a decision. So instead of trying to guess the one perfect stock, I prefer ETFs, broad exposure to a bigger theme. The one I'm watching closely is the iShares Global Aerospace and Defense, the UCITS version, ticker DFND. It is built around the companies behind the hardware and supply chains we keep talking about, with names like Boeing, RTX, GE Aerospace, Airbus, and Rolls-Royce. If you want to act on ideas like this, the process is simple. You can open an account in just a few minutes using your ID or passport, and you do not need a large amount to get started. Even a small first deposit is enough to begin building exposure step by step. Also, you can unlock Freedom 24's Welcome Promo, where you can get up to 20 gift stocks worth up to $800 each, depending on the code you activate, available until the 30th of April, 2026. Of course, investing involves risk. Past performance is not a guarantee. Check the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. If you join through our link, you directly support Money Trail and help us keep producing independent geopolitical analysis. Here is what the Pentagon will never say publicly. Turkey did not simply drift. It made 3 decisions in 3 separate years that forced every American military planner in the Eastern Mediterranean to ask the same question. Can we still trust this? The first decision, July 2019. Russian military cargo planes land at Merdad Air Base outside Ankara. Their cargo, S-400 surface-to-air missile batteries, Russian-built, Russian-coded, incompatible with every NATO defense system in the alliance. Washington had warned Turkey formally, in writing. The consequence was explicit. Lose your place in the F-35 program. Turkey purchased anyway. The F-35 contract, 100 aircraft, $9 billion, was canceled. Not suspended. Canceled. An ally that integrates Russian sensor technology into NATO airspace is not an unreliable partner. It is an active liability. Between 2019 and 2022, no Ford-class, no Nimitz-class, no carrier strike group made port in Turkey. The ships did not wait for a diplomatic resolution. They simply stopped coming. The second decision, June 2022. Sweden applies for NATO membership, triggered by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The application requires unanimous approval. Ankara vetoes it. For 14 months, Sweden's security and NATO's northern flank are held hostage over domestic Turkish politics. In every serious alliance planning room that registers as something specific, a member state using the alliance's own rules as a weapon against the alliance. That assessment does not stay in the political files. It moves into the operational ones. The third decision requires no explanation. It is a number. Between 2021 and 2025, U.S. carriers called at Souda Bay 10 times. Turkish ports, once. One carrier, one visit, never repeated. You do not need a classified briefing to understand what that means. But here's what most analysis of this story gets wrong. The Pentagon was not simply reacting to Turkey. It was building. Souda Bay is not a consolation prize. It is the centerpiece of a new architecture. 3 nodes, quietly assembled, never formally announced. Sigonella, in Sicily, provides the air bridge, F-35 deployments, maritime surveillance, rapid reach from the Atlantic to the Levant. Cyprus holds the intelligence layer, signal interception, proximity to the Syrian coast, the Lebanese border, the eastern energy corridors. And Souda Bay, Crete, deep water, secure perimeter, a harbor capable of receiving the most powerful warships on Earth and turning them around under operational pressure. 3 nodes, 1 unbroken line from southern Europe into the Middle East. The question the Pentagon was asking was never this: can Greece replace Turkey? That was always the wrong question. The real question was simpler. Can Greece anchor a network that makes Turkey optional? The carrier record answers that. Turkey did not lose its position because of politics. It lost its position because strategic ambiguity, used deliberately as leverage, has a direct operational cost. You do not send a $13 billion warship to a harbor where the alliance calculus is unclear. You send it where the record is clean. The map exists. It is not published. It is not declared. But it is visible. in one place above all others, a harbor on the southwestern tip of Crete, whose waters every serious American military planner now knows by name. We have been asking the wrong question all along. The question is not this: why do American aircraft carriers stop in Greece? That has a simple answer. Souda Bay is exceptional, Greece is reliable, and the U.S. Navy goes where the trust is. The real question is this: how did a country of 11 million people become America's most valuable military partner in the most contested maritime region on Earth? The answer is simple and brutal. Greece did not outspend Turkey. It did not out-arm it. It did not force its way into carrier port calls. It simply kept showing up. Every carrier visit answered without conditions. Every agreement fulfilled without drama. Every crisis met with support instead of bargaining. Every call from Washington answered without a new price attached. That is how trust becomes infrastructure. And that is what Souda Bay now represents. Not just a harbor, but the physical expression of a strategic relationship built quietly, consistently, and without theater. Aircraft carriers may look like symbols of independent power, but watch where they go when pressure rises. Watch where they return when something goes wrong. Watch which harbor appears again and again across years of crises, commanders, and administrations. That harbor is not flying an American flag. It is flying a Greek one. Because this was never really the story of where American carriers stop. It is the story of where America chose to anchor its future in the Eastern Mediterranean. Special thanks to Freedom 24 for making this analysis possible. If you are serious about building a great financial future, be sure to check them out in the description below. The story does not stop at Souda Bay. Watch the videos on your screen now. They show how this shift fits into Greece's wider rise and the changing balance with Turkey.